Yeah, because I was doing a showing for Rick and his clients were asking about it. And I was like, well, it's on the MLS as a little thing, so you should be able to search for it. So that's. And there's the contract for D. Perfect. Well, thank you.
There's all that.
The whiz on the MLS, aren't you?
Learned that one a long time ago. It's a little bit confusing.
Hello.
Hey, Kayla, you can distribute these as you see fit.
Oh, much appreciated.
There you go.
Thank you.
You don't like them.
Recording in progress.
Okay, Connie, I got it. Is your mic on?
What up?
Not much. How are you?
Jeff is here.
That's up too.
And then how do you get it up here?
Good, actually.
Oh, you do?
I did share my screen.
Is this gonna be us again?
Here, probably.
Yep, we're there.
Good.
Yep, I'm good.
What is the class about Facebook business page? Is that tomorrow?
That's Hannah. I think it's next week, actually. Not tomorrow.
Well, she keeps throwing you in there. She's Hannah and Jay is doing those.
Oh, yeah. So
Just-
I'm just gonna be assistant with that
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Everything looks good.
Mhm.
Perfect. How are you?
The ceiling doesn't need to, John, the ceiling doesn't need to be scraped or repaired, right?
Huh? Oh, hey.
All right. Are you gonna boot up, Brittany?
Yes.
That's right, I just don't wanna leave somebody behind.
No.
All right, so we're gonna get started. So today we're gonna do purchase agreements. And so we're gonna, once again, we're gonna go over to tools, to our transaction desk. And we're gonna go to our house and we're gonna find our buyer. So the buyer we're using is, on my system is gonna be John Resch. And now we have to write our purchase agreement. So one of the things I can quickly do is pop over to details in here. And I can enter in my MLS number. I'll get this right. And I can also put over here the street address if I want. And hit save so that it auto-populates the listing. I save, doesn't do a save, does it? All right, now I'm gonna go back to my forms. And save the page. Now I need to have my purchase agreement. And first we get a lot of them. There it is. We want the residential one. And we added that to our basket. So now we're gonna fill that out. And as you can see, it brought in his name and it brought in the address down here. So the date that you're writing it is today's the 25th. In here, you need to put in what your earnest money is gonna be. So we're gonna do 5,000. This box gets checked if the earnest money is not going to the listing broker. Okay? If you have a buyer and for some reason earnest money's coming to this office, you have to check that box and put our office name in there. Okay? Because this is what gives Kelly the right to cash that check. Okay, otherwise you will not check that box. And then, of course, I didn't get the full address in here because I didn't fill it all out, but it would put the city, it put the county in here, the zip code, and the legal description. In here, it is saying everything that is included from the house that should be there. So for instance, on here, window shades are supposed to be, if they're in the house, they should be there on the closing day. If someone has special curtains that they want to take down, the agent should have that listed somewhere or informed you ahead of time that those are going to be removed. Same thing with TV wall mounts. If they're on the walls, they're supposed to be there when your buyers purchase it, unless you say it. Down here, you can add a few other items in here. Normally, a lot of times the washer and dryer get added here, maybe an additional freezer, something like that. If it's totally personal property, that goes on the personal property sheet. All right. And then you always put in the list of your listing price. Cash. The cash will be the amount of money that they're putting down as cash. A lot of times people are doing a 20% down. And then they're doing an 80% financing. Now, when you got somebody who isn't putting an even number typed down like 20%, they're doing like 16.573. You can round it. Okay, all the numbers are going to work out on the lender side and the title side with what the actual amount is. And so it's the cash, unless it's 100% cash, it's 20. These numbers and these 1 through 4 have to add up to 100%. So you have to at least get that in there. If they are assuming, there will probably be more of these around because I think back about 4 years ago when interest rates were really low, a lot of those mortgages are assumable. So the percentage that they're assuming, if they're doing a contract for deed, we don't see a whole lot of those around, but they are there. And then your closing date. And just make sure that you are given enough time for the lender to complete the paperwork, their end of it, okay? So we're gonna go to August 8th for our closing date. Purchase agreement is or is not subject to mortgage financing. If you are working with a lender, it's always gonna be yes. If it's 100% cash sale, it will be is not. And then if it is a mortgage, is it a first mortgage and subordinate financing? That means they're getting help from one of the programs throughout the state of Minnesota that offers. Buyers shall apply for resources if they have to apply for them. You know, they have conventional, are they doing a DBA, are they doing FHA? Those are the 3 that are normally done. Normally this is 30-year mortgage. However, there are 20-year mortgages out there too, 25-year mortgages. Depending on their down payment, they may not want to be. Interest rate, we never know what the interest rate exactly is going to be for our clients. So a lot of times we put per lender, per market, because it's going to be up to the lender to lock that rate in. Sometimes lenders will say you can't go past 7.25, and you might just put that in there. 7.25. Yeah, if that's what the lender tells you, they can, they might be at 6.75 and lender might say if it goes up over 7.25, the buyer can't afford the house. They gotta lock in at the right time. So a lot of times people just do per market. And the mortgage application is to be made within 5 business days after the final acceptance, and that's something that the loan officer will take care of. This next part here, once again, when you're writing this, you're working for your buyer. When you have the seller, you're working for your seller, okay? So number 70, if your buyer cannot secure financing in the purchase agreement, and the purchase agreement does not close on the closing date, the purchase agreement can be canceled. We all know there's amendments out there that have been done to extend the closing date. Buyer and seller shall immediately cancel. Where is the earnest money gonna go to if you have the buyer?
You wanna go back to the buyer.
That's right, you always wanna go back to the buyer, okay? A lot of people, and of course, on the other side, they want it to go to the seller. So hold strong on that. And so suggestions would be best practice 270. And then check off 73. The next one, or if you don't do 70 to 75, you can do line 77 on down to, goes all the way down here, which gets a little more lengthier. And it is the written statement from the lender. Now, the lender is always going to send a written statement. So if you want to go best practice with 70 to 75, and if the buyer doesn't secure the financing, it's returned to them. Or if you're going to do the written letter, you would check the written letter. You would ask your lender when they can get that done. I chose to close on the 8th, that I normally have it done within about a week of closing. So don't choose the date unless you talk to the lender, because they'll let you know when to go ahead and get it through. This one here has a little bit more detail of what to expect with the letter and stuff to get done. And written, and then once again, in this part here, if the written statement is not provided by the date on line 78, where's the earnest money gonna go? And sometimes it will be half and half. You can't check them both, but you might, when you do the cancellation, you can write it in there, who gets what. Maybe you do give a little bit to the seller, maybe not. So always protect your buyer on this one here. And if the statement is not provided and the seller has not previously canceled, and you are doing the cancellation, once again, you want to protect your buyer, okay? Now, when we were in a really, really tough market and they had multiple offers, a lot of times they would take the risk of the money going back to the seller. But and you want to protect your buyer, best practice, check the buyer's market. And yes, an agent might come back and ask you to undo it, but you're taking care of the buyer. All right, locking in the interest rate, 113, 115, and 116. Sometimes they want you, the seller's agent might want you to lock in within 5 days after that acceptance.
Why would they care?
Because if you locked in at that interest rate, you can't unlock and get another interest rate. Once you're locked, you're
More
locked.
solidified, more,
More
okay,
solidified,
Got
more
it.
commitment,
okay.
and that, best practices, I think, for a buyer would be at any time prior to closing by the lender. Because the lender kind of has an idea where that interest rate's going more than us. They get a lot more information than we get. And so then what we can do is let them be in charge of that and just kind of hold, tight on it, just saying, you know what, the lender will lock them in. Okay, because what if it dipped? I mean, what if you were at 675 and it dipped even a quarter? That's a lot of money in your buyer's pocket. lender commitment work papers. Normally, these are on the FHA loans where they want to have work done. You can either put a 0. You can put in, if you're in a house and you know there needs to be some work, you can put a higher number in here. Safety measures, you can just add $100 in there, just to have something in there. And that's just in case the lender is requiring something to be done. A VA loan would require items to be done, painted, maybe a railing going down the steps might have to be adjusted. Oops, I went up a little fast. Okay. And when you're doing the buyers, it's up to the buyer whether or not they want to pay the re-inspection fee a lot of the times. If this is something where the buyer is asking for inspections, best practice, have your buyers pay for it because they're the ones who are hiring the inspector to go out to the home. When you guys done a lot of the FHAs loans, they were probably far and few. And here, this is if the property has, value of the property has not and less than, and you put the price in for the seller to accept the appraised price. So like this house was 305K, and it comes back at 300K. The seller then would accept the appraisal price. That's not the case for a conventional loan, but this is an escape clause in here for FHA finance. And like I said, I don't know how much of that we see. If this isn't important to you before you have your buyer sign it, you can always cross an X through here with the red line. And that way on the other side right away, that will signal that you don't have anything in that area. Lender processing fees, once again, that is for FHA and DV financing, where a seller will agree to pay buyers closing fees, miscellaneous processing fees, which cannot be charged to a buyer and not to exceed. So if you're within that, talk to the lender, find out what those fees are, find out about how much they are, so that you can put them in there. I've not run that in the past. I'm not sure how many other agents have. Once again, if you have VA funding, you're asking about certain amounts to be waived and paid at closing. If you have a VA loan in this office, we do not charge that client the $450 BCA, okay? That was something our ALC had made a decision about some time ago. So that's for the department. Sellers' contributions to buyers' closing costs. I think since we made the change with the lawsuit back in August, a lot of buyers are paying their closing costs themselves and asking to have the agent's compensation paid. So if your seller is going to ask to have some of the closing fees that the lender is charging to be paid by the seller, you would mark it is. If they are not going to ask for it, it is not. If you're in the is, it's either a dollars amount or a percentage that they're going to pay. In the past, we've seen a 1 to 3% put in that box, not necessarily a dollar mark. Okay. Inspections. Grab my mouse in here. Best practice for a buyer, get an inspection. Check that it elects to get the inspection done on the property. And if they get an inspection done on the property, then the agreement is contingency. Once again, if the inspection comes back buyer doesn't like something on the inspection report, maybe it's a major fix, something they don't want to deal with, whatever it is, they can cancel the purchase agreement. So go ahead and just click on Alex, go ahead and click on yes, what did I do? There we go. And that, and any non-intrusive testing is not done within that inspection unless you ask for it on line 178. And that means that like in an old stucco outside home, the testing company is going to want to like drill in to the home to test for moisture. And then it has to be replaced by the buyer's expense. So a lot of times you will see the word does not on there. Okay, but if your buyer really wants to do something like that, where something has to be taken apart to look at, the buyer does have to pay that expense. And the seller is agreeing to have the attic open. So if it's still sealed, that it will be cracked so that the inspector can look upstairs. And then there's the attic or crawl space. Calendar days, that can vary. Back when the market was really slow, you could go 7 days. Back when the market was really hot, they're doing inspections within a day of acceptance. So try to take a look at what day you're sending this over, what day your acceptance date might be. If your acceptance date is going to be on a Friday, you might want to write this out a little bit, like 4 days versus 3 days on a Tuesday, because you got to get an inspector in there. That means that once it's accepted, the buyer goes and schedules an appointment with an inspection company. So normally I would say 3 to 4 days in there. If for some reason you have other items that are on the property that you want to have inspected, let's say they put out a really nice big wood grill in the backyard or something like that, or a swimming pool. Maybe they want that inspected. Add that on here as other items to be inspected. The sale of buyer's property. 199 to 200. The buyer. Okay, let me. I always go down to the bottom. So number 1 and 2 depends on whether or not it's contingency on a buyer's property selling. So if you have a property that has got to be sold on a contingency to buy the next house, you would be checking line 2. You would put in when it is to close on. Line 211, buyer represents that the buyer is able to perform without the sale of the closing or other properties. Okay. So this is the addendums are in number 1 of the property where you're going to check, and we can bring up the amendment later where you put in the address and you put in how many days it's going to take to go on the market. And maybe it is on the market and you're just waiting for a successful closing. Does that make sense? Okay. Real estate taxes. On here, once again, you're working for your buyer. The buyer shall pay prorated from the date of closing. Okay. And the seller shall pay from the date of closing. That way up until the day of closing. Now, if you're down to the point where it's maybe right before taxes are due, the end of the year or something, maybe the buyer will pick it up, maybe the seller will pick it all up. If it is part of a non-homesteaded classification in the year of closing, the seller shall or shall not pay. And there isn't a big difference between regular property taxes for a homeowner that's homesteaded and a non-homesteaded. In this case, you would put in shall and have this, seller pay that difference on the property taxes. Does that make sense? Do you understand between the two? If it's a rental property, investment property,
And that would be non-homestead.
that would be non-homesteaded. If it's lakeshore cabin property, it's non-homesteaded. We probably run into more of the homesteaded properties down here.
Yeah.
On that. And then deferred taxes. On the day of closing, deferred taxes. In the sale, once again, you can check your buyer or you can check your seller depending on what's going on with those deferred taxes. If it's gonna favor your buyer for the seller to pay them, have the seller pay them. And a lot of special assessments and that I think are always paid now because the cities charge a large interest. So we're not really coming across them as much as we used to. Once again here, closing date, seller shall pay on closing date. On here, buyer shall assume on day of closing special levies and stuff like that. If it is a brand new street levy, chances are the buyer might take it. Just due to the fact that maybe they're gonna get the use enjoyment out of it. Then again, maybe they can't afford that amount on their yearly property taxes. So they might want to have the seller. So these boxes here will be kind of questioning each one of your buyers. Of course, you're gonna want to protect your buyer the best you can by asking for the seller to pay for it. And then buyer shall assume your closing or seller shall provide the payment of the special assessment.
Good question.
Yeah.
So obviously kind of a trend here, protect the buyer, so kind of defaulting to putting the responsibility on the seller. Have you seen, I don't want to call these smaller issues because, taxes and so forth can, depending on the dollar amount can be larger, but like, have you seen these impede a transaction, or have you seen it sort of like, how much of this is negotiated after the purchase agreement is signed? Like, do people counter often on some of these items, or is it kind of just you send it and they accept it more or less?
That's probably a survey for a lot of agents.
Fair enough, fair enough.
And only because a lot of times the answers to that question there, the negotiation of what happens between the time you send it to the listing agent and the listing agent, whether they're trying to do a little bit of negotiation before talking to their seller, or they've talked to their seller and they're trying to come back and negotiate a little bit with you,
Right.
and then type up a counter to reflect the agreement to have the buyer's agent sign.
And where, sorry, the second part of the question, where, because my thought is, okay, I'm putting myself in the seller's, agent's shoes. I see this come over and, defaulting towards my clients being responsible. I'd want to understand if I'm communicating them, okay, you're responsible for this, but what's the dollar amount? So is that all in the tax records? Like you can go on the MLS and kind of find a lot of this, or, because I would just, again, if it's, deferred taxes, but it's like $2, so who cares? Just let's move on, but if it's 20 grand, okay, well, hang on a second.
Right.
That's,
So if you think about the input sheet, and yet there's the area in there to fill out the taxes. So that's taxes, and it says, is assessment pending? That's a yes, no, maybe. And then it says assessment balance, and that's your assessment balance that is
Okay.
still due. And then you add your taxes with that, and that goes in the other box with the taxes with assessments. So if there is a number over there, when you go to list the property, that is what all this is referring to,
Got it.
okay?
Okay.
And if you check unknown and you've asked your sellers, do you have any assessments coming up? They say, no, we haven't gotten any letters. You can still go to the county records and check and see if there's anything pending. If it's a county you're working in, you can research their things, find out if they're gonna be assessing stuff.
Yeah, okay,
And so that's where that might go.
okay,
But that's, before we used to see that assessment amount out on the MLS. But I've noticed since like a lot of the counties and cities have started doing such a higher interest rates, people have been coming up with that $3,000 to $6,000, $7,000 and paying it off and not paying the interest rate.
Hmm.
So
okay,
I've not seen as much as I used to.
okay,
And then again, maybe they're just not fixing as many roads.
fair enough.
I know, my daughter's best friend, her and her husband paid theirs off. My dad paid his off,
Yeah,
so. But no, those are good questions to look. And then on here, once again, they're gonna ask the seller, and this is you answering this just off the information you have compiled for the listing. And as of this date of the purchase agreement, seller represents that seller has or has not received a notice about any type of pending improvements.
Okay.
Okay. And I think nowadays too, a lot of times you'll see signs in areas where they start announcing they're gonna do projects.
Hmm. Okay,
Okay. Was this a previous executed agreement? If this is the first one that you are writing on this property, it's gonna be and is not. But if you write it and it was not accepted by the seller, and you and your buyer went off, looked, and you came back 2 weeks later because they lowered their price, then it would become a is. If you write it again on the property.
because once they reject the initial
Reject.
one, then you're starting from
That-
scratch
yep.
versus countering, you're still
Right,
maintaining that
Right,
first.
you're starting over, because you didn't counter, they didn't accept,
Okay,
so. So if you're gonna write another offer on the property that's still on the market, it would be an is.
okay,
So, first time through is and is not. You get rejected from the seller for whatever reason, you come back maybe even 2 days later with a better written purchase agreement, you check is. All right. And then, of course, you have to put in the date that you had that cancellation on it. The agreement, and if is shall be attained no later than the cancellation date. You fill that in. This probably doesn't happen that often, okay? Only when we're probably in a lot of multiples, we could be going that direction as our market switches. And your deed. Everybody wants a markable deed, and we always really want to have a warranty deed. Okay, there are times when you is in a trust that you might get a personal representative deed, or you might get a trustee's deed, but then title or an attorney converts that over to a warranty deed, and yes, that may cost extra funds. But most of them are always a warranty one. Contract for deed, that's only if you have a contract for deed that's flagged because the seller is financing the property. And that, for other, if it's joint spouses, or if you need something to convey a markable title for whatever reason, then you'd fill that out. And that would be something that would be open for more discussion.
like a quick claim,
It could be restriction relating to improvements, they're saying mining rights, draining, utilities, you know, I don't even know if I've ever seen that box marked
yeah,
on that, so. You know, rights of tenants is followed for any type of tenancy, and it could be more for a joint ownership of like siblings or friends, or,
sure,
because if everyone has an investment on it, they're gonna want their name on the title. Possession. Everybody really wants immediate after close. They want to take their keys and they want to go to the house. There are some times where it might be other. Okay, it might be that the seller needs 48 hours to get out. Now, if you are previewing the house and you kind of know that you're looking at and thinking, okay, we're gonna close in 40 days. I don't know if the seller's gonna get everything out of here. Maybe we should give them 48 hours at the end. And maybe you might get countered and the listing agent might ask you to go ahead, can we have 48 hours? And that's kind of like, the seller doing a renting for 48 hours. Most cases it is immediately. And here it says that the seller will agree to remove all the debris, personal property, not included from the property by the possession date. So if you have 48 hours, they have 48 hours to get all that off. So if they leave stuff, technically it's owned by the buyer. I think a lot of buyers are nice and let people come back and get their stuff.
I can tell you a story about the last time I moved. They could have kept my grill.
Yeah. So, and then seller shall permanently disconnect any access services, devices, systems that are on there that are wireless. A lot of times they'll turn over all the codes and everything for all the electronics, for the doorbells, the heat, the app, they'll disconnect. Back prior to 2020, well, there wasn't as many of them, but they would sit on their phone and say, okay, the app is gone. Because they'd be together at the same one. And then of course, the associations rent, charges of the city water, electric, all that will be prorated between the parties. As we know, the water bill's always checked with the title company, and the title company makes sure that that's paid up by that date. Because the water bill stays with the property. Your electric and gas companies will go ahead and go with the seller wherever they go and collect. Title examination and that you will have an owner's title policy. It talks about, and that this you can read through. It just says what the buyer will obtain the title service. The seller will have a title service. If there's any subdivision of land, boundaries, accesses, this is once again just a lot that will go on. If there's any mechanics, liens, if you have the seller, that is something you kind of want to check for if you can. If you have a roof put on, a lot of times roofing companies will put a lien on the house. And then they'll forget to pull it off when they get paid. Builders sometimes with their subs, a lien might not get pulled off. It happens. And then liens also happen when someone forgot to pay their credit card and went delinquent and they put a lien on the house and they never knew about it. Or they didn't pay attention to it. If there is a risk of loss from the time, not too far, the time that your acceptance date happens and the close date, the seller has to put the house back in the condition it was. So when you did that walkthrough and you wrote your purchase agreement, that's the condition you expect the house to be in. When you do a final walkthrough before the date of close. And that's why it's really important to make sure that when you do that final walkthrough actually it's from the inspection date, I should say, because they're in the house then. As close as you can get it to your closing time. So if you have an 8 a.m. closing, you probably are going to have to walk through that evening. And in the fall of the year, try to walk through in daylight so that you have a lot of natural light. So that you can see the outside of the house and the condition of the house. Because you are then signing the purchase, the buyer signing the purchase of it. Time of essence, everything needs to go like clockwork. Anytime a lender gets a hold of the buyer and needs something, the buyer needs to get that to the lender. If you need a signature or ask to get something signed and get turned in either to the listing agent, into the lender, time is of essence, okay? It's got to move like a clockwork. everyone kind of understand days of calculation? Business days, calendar days,
Standard, yeah.
standard, okay, all right. And that. And then the release of earnest money, when it is done, if you have the buyer and the earnest money is held with the seller, the cancellation form will have a box that is checked. When you go to do it, you'll check the box, refund the buyer. Please put in there, refund through trust funds. Mail check to the buyer in their name, their address, all that on there, okay? That helps out the person who issues the check. Same thing here, if you have the listing and you get that cancellation in there and there is nowhere that says how to refund the funds, make sure it's in there because the MCA can't refund unless she knows where to send it. And what are we gonna say? Probably 85–90% of the money comes through trust funds, but it's best to put it in there. Buyer has a right to do a walkthrough at the closing. Take 1 to 2 hours to walk through that house. Turn on the washer, turn on the dryer, turn on the dishwasher, flush all the toilets, turn on the sinks, run the showers, everything. Turn on the AC. Make sure everything is in working order before you go to closing. Because this is the last time you would be able to sit down with the title people leaving the room to negotiate anything that needs to be done. If you get in there and when you were there with the inspector and things were running and all of a sudden something's not working, you're gonna wanna try to get that negotiated, and maybe the buyer's okay with it, but you just need to make sure that they have time to walk through the house. And normally they can do it in about an hour. But schedule, don't rush them. This is their time to explore, to go through the house, your time just to let them be. And that, you don't have to follow them around. Of course, we all wanna see what the house looks like. Buyer has received the disclosure statement of the seller's property or the alternative. Okay, this should be uploaded in the MLS for you to download and have them review and sign. Okay, there should always be a copy in the homes. Okay, they always say do not take on them. So you can look at them at the home. You can email them out to your client when they're interested. You can give them to your client before you go see the home. Make sure, they don't spot something on a disclosure for some reason. They may not want to see the home. Someone might have said, well, we had some water 20 years ago in the basement, and buyer might say that means mold. So they might not want to go see the house.
Yeah.
And there may be no mold in the house, never was, but it's up to them to make that decision. Okay, so then you would just go ahead and check it that they got to see that. Buyer has received an inspection report if it's considered by a city. You guys know how to find out where all our cities are located that require a so-called TISH or scope of sewer systems. And if you ever come across a city, please let the front desk know. And mainly for some of us that if we're getting more of the outstate area, we've just done everything throughout the Twin Cities area. But they're becoming more and more common.
Egan doesn't currently, I can tell you that.
No. And I'll be honest with you, I went through one with my dad. I'm glad I did it, for a lot of different reasons, but it wasn't really like getting an inspection like a home inspection. They're nothing compared to that. The city just wants to make sure the toilets are flushing, there's electric, there's water in the house. And my dad.
Fire alarms.
Yeah, fire alarms, the furnace works, they don't care if the air conditioning works. I can't remember what it was called. I said it one too many times last fall. But when you're standing in the basement and you have the pipe for the water heater that goes up into the ceiling, I want to call it some type of drop. Well, if you can see light through that area through the ceiling floor, that means if there's a fire downstairs, that fire can go right up and through the upstairs. And you have to get your hand up there. Yes, I was hoping the guy, and you have to try to put some metal reflective up in that area
Oh.
to do it. Now, new housing, you're probably fine. Older housing, look for something, you know, like that. And that's what the cities are looking for.
Hmm.
And this might be something that, I don't know if a home inspector would call it out or not. So, you know, you learn a lot when you follow some of these people around. Is your city connected to city water or sewer? Is it connected to water? If you're in here with the city, a lot of times you don't have, the sewage system on the property or a private well. However, there are places out here throughout this part of the metro that are old areas that might have a well capped. Or they might, like Burnsville has several homes that have a capped well within the basement.
Hmm.
And most of the times, this is not subject to an amendment and purchase agreement because you're not getting these inspected. Okay. Home warranty plan. Home warranty plans for a lot of buyers. It's up to the buyer if they want it. Sometimes the seller will offer it at the time and with the house for it. A lot of times you just put no down here. And the buyer can decide by close. Or they can decide to have a seller pay for it. You know, we have Cinch, America's, I can't think of what the last part of that one is. A couple other companies out there. Give them pamphlets, let them decide if they want one or not. There are people who swear that they're the best things to have. And there's other people who don't believe in these warranties. But what I do know is if you look at their list and you look at an Excel or a Centerpoint list, you can get more coverage under one of these plans per year. And if they choose not to buy it, and they've had the house for 2 years and they're like, we should have bought a plan, some of these plans will offer the home warranty plan out to an existing homeowner.
If I was, because you and I were having a conversation about
Yeah.
this a week or two ago. And I mean, it's a one-time cost.
Yeah.
I think from what I could tell from the materials that you showed me or the ones you let me keep, you know, the most expensive plan is like $800.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, to me, unless you're super tight on cash, might not be a bad, particularly if the home is, you know, over 25 years old.
Right. Yeah, and because it covers, a lot of them cover plumbing, they cover electric. And you just don't get that with like an Excel or,
No.
you know, a Centerpoint. Plus, take a look at some of those plans, you know, find out how do you get all that coverage between them. The other thing, it's not one time, it's 1 year. Every
Oh, 1 year,
1
okay.
year. I just want to clarify that.
Gotcha.
The other thing too is this might make a nice thank you gift to your client. If you think they need it, if their funds are tight.
Yeah.
You know, maybe they're buying something that you see that maybe they need. Okay. So keep that in mind. Or, I mean, and you can even, you know, tell your buyer, you know what, I know it's $500. How about if I pay $250? You know, as a gift to you towards it. I mean,
Yeah.
it's flexible, and like I said, they don't need to make up their mind till basically closing. If you feel that you want the seller to pay for it, check the seller's box, that's in favor of your client. And then, in this area here, as you can see, my information populated over here. And today I'm working as the buyer's agent. Up here, you would put the listing agent and their company, and they would be the seller's agent. Okay. You check dual if it's dual, facilitator if you're a facilitator. Okay, but your normal 2 boxes that would be checked in here are this. If you are the selling agent, just make sure that your name is up here and it's checked as selling. Seller's contribution to the buyer's broker's compensation. We've heard a lot of this from Alexis. This is where Alexis has highly recommended best practices is to use line 406 and put in what your percentage is as a buyer's agent. So if you go back and look at what you put on your buyer's agreement, a lot of times best practices is 3%. Because you can always go lower, you can't go up. So in here, you know, you've already spoken to the listing agent. The listing agent says, no, I don't have any other offers. You might put 2.7, you might put 3. Your buyer might really want it. So you might put 2.5. We used to see that number back previous to August last year, and now we don't. So in here, you are going to ask the seller to pay you our brokerage, okay? 2.7 of the agreed upon amount that your buyer is going to pay for the home. Okay, this is now negotiable with the seller. And that's what that lawsuit basically had covered. It's what Alexis has been talking about for quite a few months, I think. All right. And that unless you're going to put in a flat fee. Okay, some people do, some people don't. There was a couple companies that went around that did it. Dual agency. Does it or does it not? If it doesn't, don't worry about it, just check that it's not. If you are working with somebody within this office, then it is dual agency. And then at that time that you have explained this, and then everybody signs, your buyers and you, and it's dated. Closing costs, buyers, sellers may be required to pay certain ones. Just go through and that's where you're doing your estimate of proceeds to make sure that your buyer understands it. The settlement statement will actually have everything on it. Once again, the foreign investment, where we're not answering it on here, but title will hold out that tax if need be. Your fully executed purchase agreement, final acceptance is to be binding. And that both parties understand this is a contract. Okay, and that each side has to perform. They're consenting to electronic signatures. The entire agreement, they have gone through, they have read it, they understand it, you've explained it to them. And then if you have to put anything else in about the property. You know, and that, I don't know, I've never seen that before. And then down here would be where you would put in any of your addendums that are on here. So like in here, here's for the sewage treatment down here. If you are doing that, if you're doing condominium townhomes, it's going to be an addendum on that. One, if you do a handwritten one with one on there, you would just start checking the boxes for that. I messed up my computer. Quick. Any questions yet?
You know what, I did have a question. I was talking, it was kind of a separate conversation, but it came up. Ivy was the agent on call
Okay.
one day. We were talking about something else and she had mentioned that I don't want to make sure I communicate this clearly, but she had sort of a kind of pre-populated or kind of templated purchase agreement that she had ready
Okay,
versus just kind of going to a blank one every single time. And she just mentioned, if you need to kind of move
Mhm.
quickly, as is kind of common sometimes, that it was just good to have something like that on hand. I mean, maybe that's a separate conversation, or, I mean, do you see other agents?
I've not heard of too many doing
Okay.
that.
Okay.
Some of them may end up doing that just because of they've done it many times
Right.
and they're leaving, like, for instance, all the sub-treatments and everything under that. To
Okay.
the seller, or the taxes are on one, but the seller or buyer can pick up here
Okay.
and that. To be honest with you, if you read through this several different times, you're gonna find out when you get through that you're, listen, okay. You're gonna find out that you're getting, what's my train of thought? Used to checking the boxes. You're
Sure.
gonna get to taxes and you're gonna say buyer will pay at closing, seller will pay at closing.
Okay.
You're gonna get down to any of the additional funds. So that part of it will just become common,
Okay.
so. Yep, I did that. Dual agencies, closing costs. Purchase agreement, we went through all that, the addendums. And then at this point here, this box only needs to be checked as if the seller comes back and counter offers you. So make sure that if you do get a counter offer, that box is checked. Okay, and then if you have the foreign tax, is or is not, check whatever it is from what you know from the seller. All right, and then down below here is signatures. Your buyer's gonna sign here. If the sellers accept, they'll sign here. Technically, the sellers are the last to sign. They should put in the acceptance date. Sometimes they don't. So put the acceptance date in there. Make sure you put that one in the command, take this one, email it back to them, say, hey, I entered in the acceptance date, because their broker's gonna ask for it too. And then here your buyers are gonna sign that they got a chance to read the disclosure statements, the arbitration disclosures, the residential real property agreements, all that are separate from the purchase agreement, okay? They're acknowledging that, the sellers will acknowledge it by signing it. Oops, I went too fast. Wire fraud, once again, when you set up the trust funds, explain it to your buyers. Give them a simple, reasonable code for them to enter in. That is not sent email to them that you text to them. Okay, and I would suggest best practices would be is to be available when you're doing the trust fund. So that they can pick up the phone and talk to you when they're doing it to make sure that they don't get a wire fraud. Okay,
Right.
because once they get this wire fraud, I mean, that money can be gone. And that some of these scammers can be fairly good. And then the radon's on there again. Alrighty. Any questions on that? Any questions online?
No, thanks, Connie.
Thanks,
All right.
Connie.
All right, okay,
Thank
so
you.
we'll, or the purchase agreement, next week, the other forms and that, the arbitration and all that.
Cool.
Anybody?
Awesome.
Awesome.
Sounds good.
Sounds great.
Appreciate it.
Okay, have a good day.
Thanks, Connie.
Thank you.
Guys, that plan so dark knocking in the rain.
No, I don't think I will. I've been calling.
Okay. I've been
I
working.
mean, I've been active, I just, and this is pretty timely. So the clients I'm working with currently, they got a off-market offer that I'm
Wow.
almost certain they're gonna accept, and it's pretty textbook. I mean, financing all squared away, buyer's